Iterating on one of the most time-tested, influential, and all-round popular gaming formulas of all time is never an easy thing. It's why Nintendo have mostly stayed true to the template they established for The Legend of Zelda way back in 1991's A Link to the Past, though that gets around the fact that the first Legend of Zelda from 1986 had far more open-ended aspirations. Enter Breath of the Wild, an entry in the series that revitalizes those core foundations and rebuilds them anew. If you can imagine a world where the original Zelda was a one-off, where after 30 years Nintendo decided to resurrect this old classic and give it a new lease of life, Breath of the Wild is that game. Yes, it takes the lessons learned from how Nintendo would iterate and innovate over time, but going forward, if we ever talk about how a game or franchise is rediscovering its roots, Nintendo have provided an industry standard on how to do so. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and welcome to our full review for the Nintendo Switch version of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Some of the most indescribably cool moments in Breath of the Wild's narrative come from just how brilliantly self-aware Nintendo have written its story. The basic beats are that you, as Link, awaken a mysterious, almost futuristic-looking tomb, discover what is ostensibly an app-filled mobile phone in the legendary Sheikah Slate, and set about discovering how you got there, how much time has passed, and what the world is like around you. In a weird parallel to Horizon Zero Dawn, these revelations are best experienced spoiler-free, and for fans of Zelda especially, they're incredibly rewarding. Almost as though Nintendo have been scouring fan forums and theories for decades, writing something that tips a nod to the hardcore, whilst also being totally serviceable for everybody else. Outside of the basic Go Save the Princess setup, you'll be spun a tale of heroes past, of once friendly guardians that have been corrupted by Ganon's will, and of the hulking Shadow of the Colossus-style divine beasts, all making for a truly epic one hero saves the world setup. As a direct continuation of the 1986 original's exploration-heavy ethos, all main quests and even the final boss Calamity Ganon can be tackled in any order. Following the tutorial, you're basically told, go save Hyrule. Yet where you go first is completely up to you. North, south, east, west, it is indeed true that you can sprint straight to the final fight if you desire, though I can't guarantee you'll have a very pleasant time. At this stage, you know that every major entry in the franchise has a Link, a Zelda, a Master Sword, etc., but it's in being playfully self-aware with how much the fans love this mythology, and using Link's amnesia to deliver fan references and optional backstory that provides a perfect balance of open-world lore and a simultaneously satisfying main thread if you just want to get to the next big plot point. An evolution of what Wind Waker started and was hated for, Breath of the Wild's look is far more deftly rendered than just base cell shading, but it pulls from that colourful aesthetic and lovable feel before giving it a pastel hue, almost like a natural maturation of what Nintendo totally nailed back in 2002. You'll fight enemies on luscious green fields, delve underground for hidden puzzle rooms lavished in futuristic tones and glowing hieroglyphics, return to the surface and embark on another expedition to conquer some crumbling desert rock face, or almost freeze to death running from bonfire to bonfire. Breath of the Wild's art direction is gorgeous, but subtly so. Yes, it lacks the graphical punch of a Horizon, an Uncharted 4, or a Halo 5, but that's not the point. Nintendo have always excelled in restrained beauty. Never the one to strut into a room and turn heads with some voluptuous swagger, more the person that you get to know and fall in love with after understanding a few of their quirks. That is true beauty, and from the sprawling sun-kissed mountaintops that stretch for miles to every divine beast's innards, the vibrant homesteads, occasional cities, and the variety inherent in Hyrule's various regions, all of which makes you drink Breath of the Wild in, providing a feeling of being masterfully handcrafted from beginning to end. From top to bottom, Breath of the Wild is a completely new Zelda for a completely new generation, though it achieves this feeling by pulling from that very first installment back in 1986. The whole just go anywhere, you'll figure it out ethos is here, but now we have a number of integral survival elements that'll bring an end to your joyful adventuring if you're not careful. They feel like natural extensions of that original game's brutally hard nature, and at any given time you'll know the time of day, the temperature, or how much noise you're making. These factor into monster aggression, weather or environment-inflicted damage, alongside the ability to pull off stealth kills respectively. Link's skill set is also bolstered by a number of key powers that let you manipulate the environment, factoring into puzzles that can be solved in numerous ways. From locking specific objects in time to moving others around with a giant magnet, creating blocks of ice to traverse bodies of water, it creates a sensation of experimentation within the world's elemental aspects that'll no doubt see players discovering all sorts of secrets long into the future. There's a deep cooking crafting system where you can combine up to 5 components, be they pieces of food or monster parts, creating a staggering array of stat-boosting meals or elixirs for battle or exploration. Link also has an upgradable stamina meter which will govern everything from how much you can climb without resting, how far you can glide, and even how far you can swim. Let this meter run out when doing the latter, for example, and you'll die instantly. It's that simple. Getting this across is key because the difficulty inherent in just progressing through Breath of the Wild is one of its most rewarding aspects. Make no mistake, this is an incredibly hard game in a number of spots. Weapons and shields will break after a good 10 or so hits or blocks, enemies outside the starting center of the map will take huge amounts of health in an instant, and bosses will one-shot kill you if you weren't doing the exact thing to defend at that specific moment. If you've been a long-time Zelda fan and thought everything post-Link to the Past was child's play, Breath of the Wild often restores that sensation of being thoroughly owned by some overwhelmingly powerful enemies. The takeaway from why this all comes together, though, is the perfect balance of combat, exploration, and puzzle solving. Thanks to the survival mechanics, you'll genuinely feel as though every new foothold, mounted surface, or unlocked ability is an achievement, and across a good afternoon with the game, you'll go from intense boss battles to dynamic open-world encounters, a ton of climbing and exploration, perhaps a couple of lore-filling side quests, and some of the most rewarding puzzles Zelda has ever seen. Breath of the Wild occupies that rare space alongside the likes of Mario 64 or Ubisoft's Grow Home, where you actually cherish that the world is a key part of the game, not just a canvas for a number of icons to visit and tick off your to-do list. For that alone, Nintendo have confidently challenged their contemporaries to iterate on exactly how to even do an open world game. Number 1, you will die a lot. Nintendo have clearly been taking notes from the Souls series when it comes to just smashing your progression into the ground at a moment's notice. Thankfully, save for one god-awful forced stealth section, checkpoints are plentiful and reloads are fast, but a number of enemies, and especially the bosses themselves, will repeatedly one-shot you, forcing you to memorize specific responses to animations lest you revisit the game over screen over and over and over. Number 2, the Zelda combat does occasionally show its age. In a world of Dark Souls or third-person combat mechanics that always come complete with a dedicated dodge roll or evasive maneuver, Zelda now has a jump button, but it's kinda awkward, and its whole dodge in one of 4 directions when locked on mechanic just gets in the way of your enjoyment sometimes. Even locking on itself has a habit of targeting someone across the room instead of what's right next to you, and during one particularly fast-paced boss battle or against agile enemies, it's all too easy to lose track entirely. Number 3, it's a love letter to the truest of Zelda fans. It might have the most minor of quibbles when it comes to combat, quibbles I'm sure fans are already screaming at the screen that you couldn't change, otherwise it wouldn't be Zelda, but from beginning to end, from the Old Man to Calamity Ganon and from those iconic sound bites to one of the best uses of the original theme I've ever heard, Breath of the Wild exudes a confidence that is both worth the wait and justifies the Nintendo Switch as a worthwhile system to experience it on.